Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel Beth Chats Books. Now today is going to be a catch-up kind of video. I've just got back from Budapest with my friend. We went for 5 days, so I read a few books when I went away. I also bought a few books and I had an order of notebooks that I'd ordered from Papier that came while I was away. So this video is going to be split into a wrap-up of the books that I read and then quickly showing you what books I bought and what notebooks that I got. So, the first book I want to talk about is Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote, which I was in the process of finishing when we last spoke. So this is set in 1950s New York and it is from a male perspective and it's his story of meeting the infamous Holly Golightly, and it was a very thin novella style, so the Penguin Classics edition had 3 other stories within it, so it was quite short. I think it was less than 100 pages, and while I was reading it, it was enjoyable. However, it didn't have much substance beyond just something to read. She was kind of a deplorable character. She gets involved in some criminal activities and it goes awry. And by the time that happens, you don't really care because she kind of uses men as a way to get what she wants. She's living this high life in New York in the apartment above the main protagonist who's telling us the story of her. She's infamous and there's a man at the bar that they frequent who's besotted with her. And nothing much really happens. We kind of see people have infatuations with her. She's very up and down, party girl, and we've kind of heard those stories before, so I expected to like it a lot more than I did because it is a classic and the film is considered a classic. But while I was reading it, it was enjoyable because I liked Truman Capote's writing style. But I didn't overall love it, and the other stories were very kind of the same for me. Enjoyable while I was reading it, but didn't have much food for thought after reading it, so I don't really have that much to say on that. And then the next book I read was Michael Crummey's The Innocents. Now this is set in 18th century Newfoundland and it follows a brother and sister, Ada and Everett. Now this is one of the books that I'm also judging for the prize, so I can't say too much, but this definitely will be a book that I will come back to and discuss with you guys once I can, because I have a lot of thoughts about this one. But we'll move on. And then the next one that I read was The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. And this is kind of a contemporary thriller. So it starts with Alicia Berenson is accused of murdering her husband, Gabriel. So she's found at the scene of the crime. Her husband is all tied up. She's quivering in the corner and I believe it's a gun, I think she has. And she shot him at close range. And then she is sent to a psychiatric unit, and from the day she murders her husband, she never speaks again. And then we come across Theo, who's a psychotherapist, and he is obsessed with the case and he wants to kind of work his way up to basically working with her and trying to get her to speak again. So we take the story from there. So I think the premise is really interesting, the idea that she doesn't speak and we have so many unanswered questions as to why. And Theo plays an interesting part because we kind of get to have this deeper discussion around psychotherapy and how that works and operates and mental health and things like that. And I was quite interested in that because I want to be a counsellor, so I found those kind of things quite interesting. It is written quite well in the sense that you just keep wanting to read it. It's compelling. And the twist, while I have slight scepticism on the chronology and how everything kind of worked out, I'll give it a pass because I enjoyed it. And while I was reading it on holiday, it really filled a gap, and I was reading nearly 3/4 of it on a 2-hour plane journey, so that ain't bad. So I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I think it's quite a interesting thriller, and I think this writer has a lot more to give, and I will probably check out anything else that he decides to write. And then the next one I read was The Mysterious Affair at Styles by Agatha Christie. Now this is the very first Poirot novel. So this is set in post-war Britain. It's a country manor house, and I believe Hastings, who ends up becoming our unlikely sidekick for Poirot's detective work, he ends up being sent away from the war because he's injured, and he has an association with John, who lives in the house. He is the stepson of Mrs. Inglethorpe, who owns the property. So John says to Hastings, you can live here for a while until you're on your feet again. So Hastings lives in this house, and there has been controversy because Mrs. Inglethorpe has just recently married Mr. Inglethorpe, and it's a controversial marriage. The two stepbrothers are not happy. They think he's after her money because there's a significant age gap between the two of them. And Mrs. Inglethorpe's best friend Evelyn is also not happy about it. So John and Lawrence are the two stepbrothers, and John is married to Mary. And from here, Mrs. Inglethorpe gets murdered, and the murder weapon of choice is poison, which are all very classic Agatha Christie devices. Somebody's poisoned, everybody's accused in a house, in an enclosed space. Particularly, she likes to do manor house murders. I know she does others, and Poirot definitely investigates others, like Death on the Nile and Murder on the Orient Express. So it's not just houses, but this is a very indicative novel of Agatha Christie style. The version that I read also had the unpublished and the published ending, and the only significant difference between the two is whether the reveal was in a court scene, which is originally what Agatha Christie wanted, and then it got changed to the reveal being in the living room with all the characters and all the suspects present, which ended up really significantly impacting how Agatha Christie wrote future novels, because she quite likes using that device of having them all together in one enclosed space to do the big reveal. So this book was originally started because she had a bet going on with her sister about whether she could write a thriller novel, and I believe from the kind of intro that I read in this edition that both her sister and her mother were writers as well. But what I really enjoyed about this is it's quintessentially Agatha Christie, and for a very first debut novel, this is very, very strong. Her structuring is very clever. I really liked meeting Poirot for the first time. He's quite a character, our little Belgian detective, and Hastings was quite funny, and he provided that kind of back and forth between Poirot, because Poirot seems to know things before everybody else, and Hastings was like the reader, a few steps behind on what was going on. But overall, very strong, and I was really, really gripped and engaged by it, and I want to start reading Poirot's in particular in chronological order, so I'm going to start ordering them from the library, because I think they're just fun, indulgent reads, and she's a genius, and her mysteries are just fun, something to snuggle up to, something to just get lost in, and I kind of want to start a series after I finished the Robert Galbraiths, and I'm in between now, and I kind of like having a series to just get me through in between, so I'll be carrying on with that. But I gave that book 4 out of 5 stars. So they're the main books that I read while I was away. And then, because I only took 2 books and I finished them, and I didn't really know whether me and my friend were going to have plenty of time to read, but turns out she also did enjoy having some downtime to read. So I was, for the last day, kind of a little bit lost, because I always have a book in my hand. And so I went to Bestsellers in Budapest, which is an English bookshop. It hasn't predominantly or only got books written in English, but it does have a wide selection of books written in English, and particularly in Budapest there wasn't that many bookshops that had books written in English, so I went there. They were slightly pricey, but I found 2 books that were on my wish list for a very long time, and I had a bit of spending money that I wanted to spend up anyway because I didn't really want to take any Hungarian money back with me. So I picked up these two. So the first one is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. Now, this has just come out in paperback. I saw it in Tesco's before I went to Budapest, and it was on an offer, 2 for £8, and I was with company at the time, and I was shooed out of Tesco's before I was allowed to purchase this. So I'd seen it, then I saw it at WH Smith, and I already had 2 books to take with me to Budapest, and I didn't really think I would have time for another one, so I put it down again. Anyway, it chased me all the way around Budapest, and I found it and I bought it. So I did actually end up reading this recently. I have finished it, and I've given it a 4.5/5 out of 5 stars. Absolutely love this book. So it is a journey into the stories of Black British women. It doesn't predominantly or only deal with Black British stories. There are some white women in this novel, and white men, briefly, who intertwine with the main characters. But it's a discussion mainly of what it means to be Black or mixed race in Britain in the contemporary age. And there are some really fascinating characters. So some of these connections between the women are familial, or their friendships, or their romantic relationships. And we explore identities that are mixed, and LGBTQ identities, ethnic identities, gender politics. There's a lot kind of going on in this novel. Feminism is explored, culture appropriation, and loads of other really rich things. Now, I'm hesitant to give it the full 5 stars purely because I did think this could have been condensed slightly. I did enjoy all the stories and I was gripped by all of them massively, but we kind of went back to characters to hear their point of view when they were cameos in other people's stories that didn't necessarily add that much. It was nice to hear the different perspectives, so you'd hear a story from one point of view, and then in the next chapter we'd go over a similar scene from the other person's point of view, which is interesting because there was massive discrepancies in how characters felt in the same moment, which I found a really interesting form and structural device. But some of those instances weren't always what I would deem necessary, but that's just my personal opinion. But I really, really loved this. There were so many beautiful LGBT romances in here that I was just all for, and some of the friendships were really strong and empowering, and it was just fantastic. So I would highly recommend anyone and everyone to read this. I'm going to see my mum later today, and I'm shoving it in her hand and telling her to read it. I can understand completely why it won the Booker Prize, and I will be extremely surprised if this isn't on the shortlist for the Women's Prize for Fiction. I know it's on the long list, but if it's not on the shortlist, it will be a crime, because this is so unique and so interesting, and one of the best reads I've read in the last few months. So really, really, really enjoyed this. And then the second book that I got while I was away in Budapest was Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. Some people might have noticed that I did take this out of the library many months ago, and they might say, why have you bought this? The issue was I took it out of the library and it got reserved before I had a chance to read it, so it's always been on my radar. I've been checking the library and I can't see it, and I have so many other books out, I wasn't prepared to reserve it, which would have only cost me about 75 pence instead of pounds that I've spent on this. But from when I remember trying to read the blurb and read the first few chapters before I had to give it back, it sounds like a book I'm really going to enjoy, so I was prepared to just buy it. I'll let you know when I get to this one, but I probably won't be getting to this anytime soon, purely just because I have so many other books out, and I have 2 more books that I have to finish for the Man Booker Prize before the end of this month, so there's a lot of pressure on. So there's that one. And then I wanted to show you guys little notebooks that I ordered from Papier. So I got them in soft bound, not hard bound editions. And I kind of customised them a bit because I thought they were quite cute. So The first one, and the one I'm currently using at the moment, is this one. So if you can see, it's kind of got petals and flowers and tulips and all sorts of nice stuff. And on the back it's kind of embossed in black. But what I quite like is I customised it. I don't know if you can see, so it says BethChatsBooks Reading Diary. So I like to keep a physical diary of all the books that I read. I usually have an entry number, I don't know if you can see that, and who the publisher is, the pages, when it was first published, and then my thoughts. So I like to keep those. So this is the first one I've been using. And then the second one I thought was adorable, and it says The Anatomy of a Pug. And I just bought it as it was, I didn't customise this one. But I just thought it was adorable because I love pugs. And then the last one is also pug related, but I also put BethChatsBooks Reading Diary on this one. And it's the same on the back. So I just needed some because these aren't as thick as the last one I had, and I thought I'd cheer myself up with them. So that's everything. I'm currently reading Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. Dipping in and out of it. I started it yesterday, but it is quite intense because this is a lot more intellectually stimulating than some short story collections I've read. This requires a little bit of googling in between stories. I first read Husband Stitch yesterday and really enjoyed that. I did a bit of research into the fable-esque horror story that kind of follows that story. It's based loosely on some scary story that I believe people were told when they were younger. So I'd done a bit of research into that one and enjoyed that, but as I kind of got further into the collection, I had some issues with the middle story, which is quite lengthy because it's based on Law and Order, and I've never watched Law and Order, and it's kind of a take on that, and it's really lengthy and it's a bit repetitive, so we'll see how I get on with this one, but that's what I'm currently reading at the moment. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with a brand new video. Bye now.